This, we're joined by Suzanne Evans from UKIP. Her party want to replace first past the post with a more proportional system, and by journalist Peter Hitchens, who doesn't want to change the voting system at all. Welcome to both of you. Suzanne Evans, your party, UKIP, used to be a supporter of first past the post, so what's changed? Well,
I think what's changed is that first past the post was absolutely fine when you had a one or two, possibly even three-party system. But now we're looking at an era of 4, 5, 6, even 7-party politics, and I think it's got to change. As your statistics quite rightly say, why should it be the case that, say, UKIP and the Greens between them on current polls could get up to 25% of the votes, but they certainly won't be having 25% of the MPs in the House of Commons. So I think it's time to change. And let's not forget, there's been a call for this for very many years now.
Although not from UKIP, of course,
well,
interestingly.
Not necessarily. And of course, what's really great about UKIP now is that we are winning first past the post.
So you want to change the system?
Well, we have perhaps, when we have MPs in the House of Commons, we have the power to look at changing the system to make it more fair. But that doesn't mean, of course, that we can't win under first past the post as we are doing.
All right, so I mean, this is because it will obviously benefit UKIP in your mind. I mean, Nigel Farage used to say on this programme that he supported first past the post because it gives you strong government.
Well, it gives you strong government, but it doesn't give you fair government, and that's what we're about.
What's wrong with what Suzanne Evans is proposing? Because if you look again at the graphs that we have just shown, they don't do very well out of what is a quite high vote share.
The electoral system isn't there for the benefit of politicians or parties, it's there for the benefit of the country. And first past the post does several things. It provides strong governments faced with strong critical oppositions. It also gives us the unique opportunity in democratic countries to actually throw out a government which has proved unpopular and which we don't like. Proportional representation ends that forever. You won't get strong governments, you won't get strong oppositions, you won't be able to throw anybody out, you won't even know before the post-election negotiations who's going to be in the government, or be able to stop anybody being in it.
But would you say now that the system has changed in a sense that we have more fragmented politics? There are smaller parties. It isn't a case of just two parties and the Liberal Democrats anymore, and so your thesis in that sense doesn't have as much weight as it used to.
That's rather unhistorical. Our system actually creates two parties because it is a first past the post system. It demands that there are two parties. At the moment, the two major parties are dying. They're zombie parties. If they stood at railway stations in the street collecting money, nobody would give them any.
So they're only
held together by dodgy millionaires and by state support and by the broadcasting rules which keep them going. As the only reason they survive, this is a moment of transition. If we allow it to continue, the Tory party will collapse. The Labour Party, which is only held together by hatred of the Tory party, will follow, and we will get a new system with new parties which actually speak for people rather than for millionaires.
What do you say to that, Michael Heseltine?
Absolute garbage.
Really?
Yeah.
Which
I didn't think you were going to agree with me.
All of it?
The Tory party is the most successful political party in the history of democracy.
But when was the last time it won a majority?
23 years ago.
That was 1972, as you know.
92.
Sorry, 92, sorry, John Major. Remarkable.
It's a long time.
Biggest vote the Conservatives ever got under John. But
which they didn't predict, but it's changed, hasn't it, Michael Heseltine? They're not getting majorities.
The fact against this particular background now is that we've had the longest recession in modern times, the most severe recession in modern times, with a coalition including the Lib Dems. In the old pattern, the protest vote, the disenchanted, the frustrated, would have gone from the major party to the middle ground, the Lib Dems. But actually, they being in coalition, it has gone to the smaller parties that have picked up a lot of this vote. Now, I don't see any reason at all why the former processes shouldn't return when the bitterness of the memories of the recession disappear.
It's because your own party is fundamentally ridiculous. I mean, you yourself, one of its major sponsors, one of the closest advisors to David Cameron, are one of the most fanatical supporters of the European Union in the country. And yet your party, the party which you sustain, goes before the public claiming to be offering an opportunity to exit the European Union. It's ludicrous. Nobody of the half a wit could be taken in by it. You certainly aren't taken in by it. You know perfectly well that
but what's that got to do with the electoral system? Yes, Michael, answer that and then we'll go back to the electoral system.
This is a parody of the real world.
No, it's not.
I'm passionately for Britain. I'm passionately for Britain in the power structure of the world. And therefore, if I see a power structure which influences us dramatically, call it Europe, call it the Atlantic Alliance, I want Britain to be at the forefront of influencing that.
So my Britain
Hang on, let Michael finish and then I'll come to Suzanne Evans.
You had your little rant. I'm telling you, I am for Britain in wherever the power structure matters. It matters in Europe, it matters in the North Atlantic Alliance, it matters in the Commonwealth. We have to be at the top table. Well, that's why I'm keen on Britain being part of Europe.
We have very little influence in Europe now, but to get back to the voting system, the course, the other thing that needs to desperately change is the size of constituencies. It's completely unfair that you have 111,000 electors in the Isle of Wight to get one MP and only 22,000 in the Western Isles. You know, a vote in the Hebrides is worth 5 times as much as it is in the Isle of Wight.
Would this be a red line for you, Suzanne Evans?
Well,
would the voting system be a red line in any negotiations? Let's say there's a hung parliament.
The only red line we have
is
said
going to be the European referendum.
But
okay, so you don't feel that passionately about it then?
We can either change the size of the constituencies, you know, and make it more fair, in which case first past the post would be a lot fairer because it would have a more proportional effect anyway, or we have to change the voting system.
All right, I mean,
it's certainly something we'll be campaigning for.
Isn't there a danger, though, that the feeling of many of the voters who feel disenfranchised, marginalised, can't see anything to choose between the Conservatives and Labour, rightly or wrongly, that they'll feel even more disenfranchised after this election, UKIP voters, Lib Dem voters, Green voters, if there isn't a change?
Well, I hope they will feel disenfranchised, because each election we've had for the past several occasions has been a Groundhog Day, where you start the day with, you go to bed with the assumption that something will be different in the morning, you wake up, the day is exactly the same,
well,
all over again.
Was
it's this lot, whether in their Labour guise or their Tory guise, will govern the country. And people are getting frustrated with this. But the only way they're going to get out of it is by ceasing to vote tribally when general elections come round for the parties which despise them, which are the Conservative Party and the Labour Party principally,
arguably,
and who will stand before them claiming to be.
So you would like to see a fairer deal for the smaller parties?
But I think I would like to see a fairer deal for the electorate, but with the end of the. I would actually like to see laws making it impossible for these dead parties to raise the sort of money that they do. I'd like them to cease getting state subsidies, and I'd like the broadcasting rules to be changed so they aren't so heavily biased in favour of the incumbent parties.
Which system do you actually propose?
Well, I think we need to look at that. I mean, Nigel said he prefers AV+. I'm not so sure.
I thought that was in your... Well, what's in your manifesto, then?
We don't have it. We don't say anything in the manifesto.
Right.
We say it needs to reform, and I think that's something that the party would have to look at and our members would have to vote on.
Very briefly, on the SNP, I mean, we raised this issue, and it has to be quite brief. They will do very well if the polls actually are borne out in the result. They will do much better than their vote share. Is there anything that can change that in your mind? Should there be anything that change that? They are legitimate MPs. That's just the way first past the post works.
Yes, and this is a phenomenon for the Labour Party. The Labour Party has failed in Scotland. It's failed in large parts of urban Britain.
But from an electoral point of view, isn't it an issue for all the parties?
Well, but in one election. But just as you heard from the UKIP position, they now want to change their position because they think they will gain from it. You cannot have a constitution which adjusts its electoral system every time simply because an individual group of parties say, well, we will gain if you do that or not.
Sometimes politicians change their mind because it's the right thing to do, Michael. This might be a unusual phenomena for you, but I think we do think it is the right thing to do, and I think it's wrong to
if you think the right thing to do is to give Britain a system of government which fragments the decision-making, which makes every decision
well, hang on, isn't the decision-making fragmented at the moment?
Behind closed doors, if that is the system you want, go for it. But
well,
this country has been one of the most successful parliamentary democracies in history.
Maybe,
and
but not
trying
anymore.
to change it simply because UKIP think it can do well in one election
at the
is
moment,
unthinkable.
We're getting a coalition that nobody's ever voted for, and that's not fair. An actual proportional system would at least allow people to vote for the government.
Lord Heseltine wants a system of government in which this country is run from the European Union in Brussels anyway. So why he's worried about the breakup of the United Kingdom, I'm not absolutely sure.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. But
Peter,
just
this is
hang on,
typical
Michael.
Rant. It has no
it's all true. This is the trouble. Every word of it is true.
It is great, but we are going to have to leave it there. Although, actually, I've just said that. I've got one tiny thing. UKIP's manifesto said it would restrict postal votes to those with a valid reason to have one.
Yes, absolutely right. We think that postal voting fraud is now rife, and that's not just UKIP saying that. We've had judges saying that. We've had the recent fiasco in Tower Hamlets. It's got to change. The Electoral Commission, since it was established, has actually overseen massive increase in fraud, and a lot of that's because of postal votes.
Peter Hitchens, thank you.
Thank you.